Okay, thank you for introduction, there, Benjamin. Dear colleague and students, I wish everyone a good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank all the workshop organizing committee, especially Dr. Doğa Karakaya, Dr. Birgül Öğüt, and Dr. Benjamin Irvine for inviting me to this distinguished platform and for giving me opportunity to share my research. My studies on NGV date back to 2009 to my master thesis. In addition, the most important problem addressed by my PhD thesis was the taxonomic diagnosis of new gloom weak type. So I have been working on NGV for more than 10 years. I would like to this opportunity to thank Girolamo Fiorentino and Simone Reel for their support in all my studies. Recent archaeobotanical and ancient DNA studies of Neolithic wheat have revealed that different types of wheat were grown in the Near East, in addition to ammer and einkorn and freight wheats, known in the literature as three main wheats. Studies on the subject have focused on remnants that are not similar to the spikelet base of ammer and einkorn and that were classified as Macoid ammer by Mullins at Jaferik in eastern Anatolia. Jones et al. Documented the spikelets of this controversial wheat in some Neolithic and Bronze Age sites of Greece and named this type of wheat as Triticum nigulum wheat type in their publication of 2000. After this study, similar remnants have been found in many Neolithic and Bronze Age sites in Europe. The earliest remnants of the new type in Anatolia date back to pre-pottery Neolithic phase B of the Jaferik, Boncuklu, and Aşıklıoğlu sites, dating back to first half of 9 millennia BC. Remains of the new type have also been documented in the sites of Çatalhöyük, Yumuktepe, and Yenikapı, which date back to around 7 millennia BC. Recent ancient DNA analysis on NGV resides by Tchaikovsky et al. Demonstrated that NGV belongs to Timofeyev group of wheat species. I not see my PowerPoint. Okay. Since the NGV wheat type is similar like to ammer and spalta wheat, the taxonomic identification of these species usually done through morphobiotic analysis on the base of the spikelet. Ulas and Fiorentino reconsidered the identification criteria for new types of wheat grains and spikelets in the morphobiometric studies on NGV wheat resides and spikelets in the sites of Yumuktepe and Yenikapı in 2020. The mentioned study significantly contribute the identification of the morphological characteristic of NGV grains by analyzing a whole NGV spikelet of Yenikapı. The studies carried out so far show that, unlike ammer, einkorn, and freight-threshing wheats, the first cultivation of new type was in Anatolia, while in the classic wheat triad in question has been documented in many Neolithic sites in various regions of Near East. The new type has so far only been documented in Anatolia. This data also led to new debates on the origins and diffusions of new type and therefore cultivation of the Neolithic wheats. Conducted studies on NGV have formulated the following questions regarding the origin and spread of the Neolithic agriculture. Were more types of wheat domesticated in the Near East during the Neolithic? When, where, and how was NGV domesticated? The founder crops really consist of 8 species. Did the preferred wheat species in the Neolithic period vary from region to region, and the some wheat types follow different routes of expansion? Excavation at Yumuktepe, one of the oldest site areas in the Mediterranean coast of the Anatolian city of Mersin. Early Neolithic level is datable 7000 BC. At the eastern Yenikapı archaeological site, the early Neolithic layers date back to 6400 BC. In order to identify the morphobiometrical characteristics of the NGV spiked species, 15 spiked samples selected randomly at Yenikapı and Yumuktepe sites were measured. The morphobiometrical characteristics of each spikelet were observed and measured under the stereoscopic microscope with the enlargement ratio of 4 times. For each sample, four reference points were obtained. These are as follows, with the internode corresponding to the lower part of the scar, L in figure, maximum width at the level of this articulation of the scar corresponding to around the central part of the scar, width of the base of the gloom in lateral view, width of scar. The biometric analysis conducted in this study showed that the NGV spikelets from Yenikapı were larger than those of Yumuktepe. The most important variations were along the PC1 axis, 68.1% of total variance, and mainly concerned parameters L, L1, of which L1 was the most significant and best discriminant, supporting the presence of 2 distinct NGV populations. Additional variations in the parameters N and to lesser extent C were modulated by PC2, 15.5% of total variance. In general, PCA, so principal component analysis, highlight a greater variability in terms of size among the Yenikapı samples than those of Yumuktepe, which in contrast were more homogeneous. Specifically, L1 was greater and more variable in the Yenikapı samples, as was the width of the scar. With reference to the criteria set out in previous studies, the key morphological feature of the NGV samples from Yumuktepe and Yenikapı ventral view are listed as such. The primary cal is prominent and protrude ventrally. The base of the primary cal is the same level of this, as the scar and develops outwards before rising. The secondary cal is sharply angled with a vein that starts near the base and runs along the preserved length. The base of gloom is rounded. There are small holes mainly towards the lower part of the scar, which are the traces of the vascular bloods. The morphological feature in dorsal view are as follows: robust internodes, prominent or raised papilla, long and deep veins. The secondary cal is sharply angled and present veining that starts near the base and rounds along in its entire line. The morphological feature in lateral view are as follows: robust base of the gulum, long and prominent veins. In our research carried out on the Neolithic materials of Yeni Kapı, we found a whole NGV spikelet with a caryopsis inside it, the presence of which is very important for the precise characterizations of these species, yet still a matter of dispute. The morphological feature of these caryopsis were broadly similar to those described in previous studies. In dorsal view, at the apex, mainly truncated and sometimes rounded. NGV, generally flat, while the caryopsis of Triticum dicoccum have a hump shape. In ventral view, flatted appearances with a deep growth and slightly tapering embryo. In lateral view, in this case too, particularly flatly appearance compared to other halt species. On the basis, the other caryopsis of Yeni Kapı and Yumuktepe were also tentatively attributed to NGV. Biometric differences between the Yeni Kapı and Yumuktepe samples in terms of the size of the NGV spikelet base may be due to varying conditions as hypothesized with regard to the comparison between two French sites, or due to differences in cultivation techniques or environmental conditions. The latter are interrelated since environmental parameters such as light, moisture, and nutrients directly affect the agriculture technique used. If crops are no longer suited to their original environment and soil, they disappear, although they may continue to be cultivated in other regions, as in the case of Triticum spelta. Until now, emmer and einkorn weeds have been found in all Neolithic sites in Europe and the Near East. However, the map showed that in the Neolithic, NGV was grown in no other region of the Near East except for Anatolia. The studies conducted so far show that this Neolithic weed, unlike emmer and einkorn, was limited to Anatolian and European farmers. This hypothesis is supported by the observations that NGV has been found in many sites in Europe, more than 20, but 5 in Anatolia, only 6. The biometric analysis conducted in this study showed that NGV spikelets from Yeni Kapı were larger than those of Yumuktepe. These differences are probably also related to chronological differences between the two sites. It is assumed that the specimens grew in size as wheat cultivation technique improved over time. If this hypothesis is accepted, then we would expect the biometric of NGV to have increased over time and Yeni Kapı forks or spikelet to be larger than those of Yumuktepe as found out in this study. In addition, Yeni Kapı farmers may have used different technique from Yumuktepe farmers due to environmental factors. Indeed, while Yumuktepe and its surrounding have typically Mediterranean characteristics in terms of climate and vegetation, Yeni Kapı reflects the climate and vegetation of the Balkan and Mediterranean region. Therefore, the biometric differences between the NGV spikelets of two sites can be explained with the reference to these two factors. The NGV samples from Yumuktepe and Yenikapı share certain morphological features with other NGV samples, such as the U-shape, marked veining, and rounded scar. However, they also have morphological aspects that distinguish them from samples recovered from other sites, including a robust appearance and even more strongly marked veins. In addition, in some cases, the scars on the Yumuktepe NGV samples have small holes in the center. On the other hand, the Yenikapı samples have very clearly delimited scar and smooth surface. The latter feature also being observed in the French NGV samples, as well as samples from Çatalhöyük and the sites in Serbia. These differences may be the results of storage conditions and carbonization. Alternatively, they could correspond to the difference between varieties landraces within NGV. For the latter hypothesis, a systematic morphologic study of all available assemblages will be necessary, which was beyond the scope of this study. The first proposed that NGV is none other than Triticum timofevi was Jones et al. Recent ancient DNA analysis on NGV by Chaskowska et al. Have proven that this wheat belongs to the timofevi wheat species group. The archaeobotanical studies conducted so far show that the site with the oldest documented NGV cultivation is Caferöyük in the Taurus region of southern Anatolia. Since central Anatolia lies outside the traditional and modern distribution ranges of the wild progenitors of the founder crops, the documentation of NGV at Aşıklıöyük and Boncuklu, coupled with Caferöyük, can be interpreted as demonstrating the rapid spread of NGV from the Taurus region to central Anatolia. Like NGV, another product that is said to have spread rapidly from the Taurus region is the chickpea. Another location contributing to the rapid spread of founder crops is Cyprus, which was an integral part of Neolithic maritime routes. However, the only wild spaces on the island corresponding to the plants that make up the so-called Neolithic founder crops is barley. Based on this station and reason explained above, it appears that NGV spread rapidly from southern Anatolia to central Anatolia. On the basis of new documentation from the PPMB sites of Aşıklıöyük and Boncuklu, the pottery Neolithic sites of Yumuktepe and Yenikapı, it is suggests that NGV was domesticated in two different regions, Transcaucasia and Anatolia. The archaeobotanical data currently available indicate that the timofevi has been cultivated in Transcaucasia region since the Bronze Age. It has therefore been suggested that the timofevi could have been domesticated independently in Transcaucasia region. However, if we assume that Triticum timofevi is in fact NGV, it seems more reasonable to suggest that it was initially domesticated in the region of the PPNB site of Caferöyük, 5,000 years before the appearance of NGV in the Bronze Age sites to about 3000 BC of Transcaucasia region. Furthermore, the absence of Triticum araticum, which is considered ancestor of Triticum timofevi, in some regions of the so-called Fertile Crescent, Palestine, Israel, Jordan, southern Syria, together with its presence in the northern part of the Fertile Crescent, Taurus region, might indicate that NGV's area of origin is southern Anatolia. Recently, Mori et al. Examined the intraspecific variation of macrosatellite loci in the chloroplasts of white and domestic Timofevi. On the basis of the results of their study, the researchers hypothesized that the domestication of Timofevi unfolded in the region of southern Turkey or northern Syria rather than Transcaucasia. According to some researchers, the 8 founder crops that form the basis of the origin of agriculture were first domesticated in the Fertile Crescent region during the PPM period. However, others argue that many more crops were probably domesticated during PPMB. Compared to other founder crops, NGV differs in terms of its origin and dissemination. NGV was probably among the founder crops of Anatolian origin, which subsequently became associated with the European Neolithic due to environmental conditions, eating habits, etc. Valamotti and Kotsakis emphasize the differences between the crops cultivated in the Near East and Europe in their study of Neolithic agriculture of the Aegean. Finally, as mentioned above, it's still too early to make definitive claims about the first use of NGV. The fact that so far NGV has not been documented in Near East does not mean that NGV will not be identified in this region by future research. With the NGV number of founder crop species would rise to 9, but the presence of Triticum compactum at the Jonathan tree site, dated to PPMB, indicates that there were still other wheat species as confirmed by discovery of remains of hexaploid ridges at the Jafaroic and Ashokloic sites, also date to PPMB. Previously, it was thought that the Neolithic farms of Yumuktepe moved this region together with the full Neolithic complex from the plain of Amuk. However, recent excavations at Yumuktepe have revealed architectural elements such as mud, bricks, and red floors, and agriculture products such as NGV that reflect a Neolithic culture distinct from that Amuk and in fact more similar to the central Anatolia. Furthermore, but the Taurus region and central Anatolia lie on routes associated with the trade in obsidian of Cappadocian origin. The shared traditional architecture and technological characteristics of obsidian, as well as the use of common cereals and agriculture products such as NGV, suggests wide-ranging interaction or even a coin between the communities of Central Anatolia and Kilikia. In terms of agricultural products, Valamotti argues that during the late Neolithic period, the north of Greece was characterized by the consumption of acorn and the south by consumption of emmer. Recently, she has argued that some parts of northern Greece might have preferred NGV, perhaps because it was an important ancestral crop. On the other hand, in the sites of the Near East and Anatolia, the consumption of emmer was predominant. Wilcox also suggests that there is difference between the Levant and Taurus regions regarding wheat preference. At the site in the Taurus regions, such as Chayone and Jafaroic, emmer was the dominant wheat, in contrast to the Middle Aerofrat sites, where white acorn and barley were the main components. Similarly, the map of distribution of NGV in Neolithic sites shows that it was cultivated by European Neolithic farmers rather than Anatolian ones. These indicate that the preferred wheat species in the Neolithic period varied from region to region, and as a result, some wheat types followed different routes of expansion. Thank you for attention.